I should walk from Buffalo every morning.
What's going on with the partition? When I left, there were no partitions. I came back, I see partitions.
It's the partition plan of 2022. They're renovating the kitchen downstairs, so they closed off the room and they have all of the supplies in the kitchen. They moved here. I'll focus the camera. You could see with their boxes. They have boxes in the room in between the slits of the partition because they put all the kitchen fridges and boxes, whatever they had, they put in there. We'll cover the renovation. Okay, so let's get started. We were all the way at the bottom of Ayin Testament Aleph, and we learned a story why David HaMelech prohibited people from marrying from the Gavonim, from marrying into Klal Yisrael. That's because they wanted to exact a brutal revenge from Shaul by killing 7 of his descendants. And that disqualified them from being part of Klal Yisrael because, as David HaMelech said, the 3 midas that every Yid has to have are Rachmanim, Baishanim, and Goyim and Chasadim. And they couldn't even check off the first item, the Rachmanim, because that was not exactly a display of Rachmanis to insist on killing 7 people for the revenge of losing their parnasa. And that disqualified them permanently from ever being part of Klal Yisrael. So Frek the Gemara. So we are at the bottom of Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph, and I believe we're up to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom, the last word at the end of the line. Frek the Gemara, Unasinim, David Gozer Alam. Did David first initiate the Gzeira against the Gevonim? Moshe Gozer Alam. It was already from Moshe's time where there was a Gzeira. In Hazinu, it says, it's including everybody. It says, and then it says, and Rashi says right over there in the pasuk, you have a raya from here that the Gevonim also fooled Moshe, and they got him to allow them into Klal Yisrael because they dressed up like some foreign nation. So Moshe didn't realize that they were from the Shiva Amamim, and therefore Moshe made that they should become Chayt ve'etzim. Rashi says here, Midakarinu l'Chayt ve'etzim ban payu, since they refer to as Chayt ve'etzim, Shema mina, this tells us Lav b'chlal Yisrael ninu. They're not Klal Yisrael. The Lav b'chlal Gerim, and they're not considered like regular Gerim who are totally absorbed into Klal Yisrael. Ella avodim, they're like avodim, avodim psulim ninu. Avodim are puzzled to marry the Klal Yisrael. They give oinim chayt ve'etzim ninu. They were made into wood choppers. The lachiach tzin yushu. So I want to bring up a very interesting point. Rashi says that since the Torah says that they're chayt ve'etzim and they're shoyev imayim, that's a raya that they're not eaten. What's the raya? So I once said over, I heard it from Hasidic Svarim and I heard it from Litvish Svarim. Never in Gans Tanakh will you ever find a Yid is referred to by what he does for Elohim. That's a denigrating term to minimize the value of a Yid by calling him a doctor. That's you're making fun of him being mavazim. He's so much more than a doctor. He's a Yid who keeps the Torah and keeps the mitzvahs. He's not a doctor. He's not a lawyer.
Don't tell that to his mother.
He's not a president. He's a Yid. He does Torah and mitzvahs. I don't need coffee. I don't need coffee. It's if you make it for yourself. He makes Torah and mitzvahs. That's what a Yid is. And there's 2 stories that I heard over in relation to this. But this is a very important lesson because on the one hand, yes, if you're a big doctor and a big lawyer, you should know that your main function is a Yid. But what if you're a lowly boiler mechanic, or you're a garbage collector? You should have the same level of pride as the president. But ich bin a Yid. So it works both ways. We have to know that we're Yidden. If somebody asks you, what do? You don't tell them, I'm a plumber, I'm a lawyer, I'm a Yid. I do mitzvah mashdoidim. Oh, you wonder what I do for a living? So every time a shulach from Israel comes and asks me, who was there with dollar signs in their eyes, I tell them, was tiyach, the mitzvahs and masim doidim was a Yid of the Yid. So he says, nein, ich will was there. Oh, die willst wissen, was ich mache für Panusa? Ah, das ist gut nicht, ich mache the air conditioning. But then I told him I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I have to reinforce that in my own mind, that who am I? Who am I really? What is the essence of a Yid? So there's a famous story with somebody, a Talmud went to Baruch Ber after not meeting him for a long time. Baruch Ber asked him, so he says, oh, I'm a sugar merchant. Did the Rebbe see what's happening to sugar on the commodity market? So Baruch Ber, as if he didn't hear him, asked, so so this Yid thought maybe Baruch Ber couldn't hear well. He said it over again. And this happened a third time. After the third time, he asked the Rebbe, I heard this. So the Rebbe said, so ich halte gaan fragen, was dit die? En die haalt me gedaan zoeken, was de Rebbeinu Shalom tiet. Ich will wissen, was dit die van de Eibischter die. Leert, davens, ich will nicht interessiert, was de Eibischter die tiet jetzt van dir. I'm asking you what you do, not what God does for you. You're a sugar merchant and you're making a lot of money. That's what God does for you. I want to know what you do for the Rebbeinu Shalom. Thank you so much, Moti.
On the other hand, Reb Slaker asked me for a lift.
Right.
I told him, if you can jump into the truck, I can give you a lift. When he comes into the truck and he asks me,
If he climbs up in the truck, he gave himself a lift.
he asked me how Parnus is.
Right.
I told him, okay. He goes, what kind of roofs are you doing? Like, he got interest into it. And then after just about a moment, he said, okay, now I can ask you about your Parnusis and about your learning. I said, you could have started right away with learning. He said, no, I first want to start out, make sure you're okay. Then I can ask you about your listening.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky never asks me about who I'm learning with. Shmuel always asks me, "What's my parnasa?" That's the first question he always asks. So then the Chassidus story is there's the same thing. Somebody went to a Rebbe. I don't remember the stories, but there's many stories such as this, and he tells the Rebbe what he does. And the Rebbe keeps telling him, "Ich will nicht wissen, dan panusa. Ich will wissen, wo du titzt. Are you fulfilling your responsibility of a Yid?" So that's what we learn from this puzzle. If someone's identity is what he does for a living, that's what a Gavoini is. A Yid's identity is a Yid. Moshe Zok to Gemara, you're right. Moshe Gazel Lahudar. Moshe made a Gzera, but his Gzera was only for that generation. He didn't intend that it should be a permanent designation. David Gazer Lachuladar. David Gzera was forever. Correct Gemara, even after Moshe, but before David, Lakati Yeshua Gazer Alai. Yeshua already made a Gzera on the Gavonim Dechsiv. Vayitnem Yeshua Bayoimahu Chayt Ve'etzim V'Shoyav Emayim La'eda. Side they were servants for the Yidden as well as Ula Mizbeach Hashem. They were also the servants who provided the supplies to the Beis Hamikdash. So Gemara Yeshua Gazer Bismancha Beis Hamikdash Kaim. Yeshua's Gzer was only when the Beis Hamikdash was Kaim, not to extend past that. David Gazer Bismancha Ein Beis Hamikdash Kaim. David Gazer when the Beis Hamikdash wasn't Kaim. Now we know when Yeshua was there was no Beis Hamikdash, but there was a Mishkan. In David HaMelech's time, there was not, and therefore, David's Gzer was even after, so it was going to be forever. Zok to Gemara. I guess when David made the Gzer, maybe there wasn't. There was already. Are you sure there was Mishkan? Wasn't that after Shiloh? There was already a Mishkan. David's time didn't the Plishtim steal the Aron already?
They stole the arm, but the arm was returned. And then it was going to help us with this. But I'm pretty sure that there was a Mishkan all the time.
Was there a Mishkan the whole time during David's rule?
Yeah, just about. Even without the Aron, there was a Mishkan. They still brought their karbanos and stuff. So there was a Mishkan the whole time.
Up until they actually made the Beis Hamikdash in Shlomo's days.
Yeah.
So maybe David made the Gzer that it's not. We know that Yeshua said in his Gzer, "Ulam Mizbeach Hashem." He said that they are going to be servants for the Mizbeach. So he hinged it. He linked it to the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe David didn't.
In the note, it says that it's for after, in the event that the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, is later destroyed.
That's what David said.
Yeah.
So David said, even if the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed, even though Yeshua was only then, I'm extending it even afterwards. Okay, very good. Zakir B'mei Rebbe, in the times of Rebbe, Bikshu Lahater Nesinim. They wanted to change things and start allowing Nesinim. Amalam Rebbe, so Rebbe told them, Chelkein Natir, that we have a schus, that there are avodim, that we can be matter. And Rashi says, and Tosfos says, because of Hefker, Bez, and Hefker, they could take away this resource that we have, this financial resource. But Chelik Mizbeach Miyatir, the Gzeir that Yeshua made, that they're avodim to the Beis HaMikdash, we can't undo that. Upligid Reb Chia bar Abba. But Rebbe argued on Reb Chia bar Abba. The Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yechanan, Chelik Eda la'olam aser. The Chelik of the Eda will remain aser. Rashi's Achi Yitiruhu, until David HaMelech will be matir, until Bez Nagad will be matir. Chelik Mizbeach is man Beis HaMikdash Chaim aser. Ein Beis HaMikdash Chaim Shari. It automatically ended when the Beis HaMikdash ended. Okay, Zok Heilige Mishnah. We're getting into a new subject now of Saris. Amar Rabbi Yeshua. Shemati, I heard some confusing information. I heard Saris Choylet v'Cholton Lishtoi. A Saris, if he's the Yovein, he could do Chalitza. If he's the Nifter, then his brother could do Chalitza to his wife. And I also heard exactly the opposite. A Saris loy Choylet v'loy Cholton Lishtoi. The English Lefarish, and I'm not able to explain when one applies and when the other applies. Rabbi Kiva, Ani Afarish, I will explain it to you. Sris Adam, someone who, Rashi says, Shenistaris la'achar shenoilad, he was born healthy and then he got injured. Then Choylitz v'cholton lishtoi, he has the status of someone who can do chalitza, and he is someone whose wife requires chalitza, because there was a time where he was healthy. But Sris Chama, which Rashi teaches as a mimei imay, he was born that way, so he never had a shasa kosher. Loy choyletz v'loy cholton lishtoi mipnei shaloi hoysaloi shasa kosher. We're not discussing now yibum because pashas they can't do yibum regardless because they can't be boinish emachiv. The question here merely is if there's a shchif to do chalitza. Rabbi Eliezer says, and we're going to comment on that too, about yibum over here. Rabbi Eliezer Omer loiki. I disagree with you. It's the opposite. It's possible that this person will become better and will be able to have children. But Sris Adam, that's someone who someone who's a Sris Adam cannot reverse that condition. Hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseir. So we want to bring a story that's going to support one of these two shitas. Hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira, al ben megusas hay b'shalayim Sris Adam. This fellow was a Sris Adam. The yibmu es ishtoi, and they did yibum. So until now we were talking about chalitza. Now we're saying that the brother did yibum on the almana of ben megusas. Lakayim divrei Rabbi Akiva. This is a raya to Rabbi Akiva. So what does Rashi say? Lakayim divrei Rabbi Akiva. Eidezu shoy b'shuv ben Beseira was Lakayim Dive Rabbi Akiva Hayid. He said the ages to support Rabbi Akiva, who says that a Sris Adam Choyletz v'Cholton Ishtoi. Here you see there was the Yibum done because he had a Shasa Kosher. You see, even Yibum was able to be done. Dive Rabbi Akiva. So now we're going back. Whichever Sris we're talking about, whether it's a Sris Chama according to Rabbi Akiva or a Sris Adam according to Rabbi Eliezer. But as Sris loy choylitz v'loy miyabim, he will not do chalitza nor will he do yibam. The chain islandess, the islandess as well, loy choyletzes, if she is the almana, she doesn't require chalitza v'loy mishabemis, and no one does yibam. Now, what happens if a Sris shecholatz leave him? What if a Sris who was not royu to do chalitza did chalitza anyway? So the lach is loy pasla. She will not be possible as a chalutza to marry a kohen. Bala, what if he was boiler? Pasla, now she may no longer marry a kohen, but they should be l'snus because she's a zoyna. The chain islandess shachol to la'achim. The same thing about an islandess who's not a bas chalitza. If the brothers did chalitza to her, loy paslua. They don't pass her from kuna. She's not a chalutza because she has no shaykhs to chalitza. It's a play. But balua, if they were boiler wrongfully, well then paslua. Because she's considered a Zaina, and the Kohen may not marry a Zaina. We heard that Rabbi Kiva said that Chayve Lavin Chayve Krisis. Right? Rabbi Kiva said that collusion is not Toivus B'Chayve Lavin, and the child of a Chayve Lavin union is a mamzer. We learned that Rabbi Kiva holds that chayve lavin is chayve krisos. The chayve krisos lavin a chalitza v'yibim, and chayve krisos cannot do chalitza or yibum. So Rashi chayve krisos dami Rabbi Kiva b'chalitz yesh mamzer mechayve lavin. Right, we learned earlier Rabbi Kiva holds that chayve lavin produce a mamzer. Usris adam mechayve lavinu. A shris adam is a chayve lavin. It says lo yavoy mitzuadaka. Even though he had a shas kosher, there's still an isser for him to marry a bas Yisrael. So Zok Rashi v'heichi kam Rabbi Kiva shris choylitzes eishes achiv. How could Rabbi Kiva say that a shris could be choylitz because he had a shas kosher? Halei ram yakamei, he does not have a mitzvah because there's a chiyuv lav on him. So since there's a chiyuv lav on him, he will not be able to do yibum. So therefore, he's poigeya v'yeshazach. So Freik the Gemara, how could Rabbi Kiva say that he's a ben chalitza? Zok the Gemara, Rabami hachab b'mayiskinan kigoyin shenasa achav giyores, because this woman the almana is a giyores. It says lo yaveh psudaka b'kal Hashem. But in this case, his brother married a giyores. They died without children. The giyores felt him leave him, and he can make ibum. He can make ibum because there's no issue for psudaka to marry a giyores. Of course not. Well, the shilas of kal gerim ikri kahal, but if you hold kal gerim ikri kahal, I'm sorry, if you hold kal gerim like you can marry yours. Hey, can marry yours. Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Kiva, Savalak Rabbi Yosy, Damar kal gerim like kahal. I forgot the next line is a very important ingredient, and Rabbi Kiva happens to hold that kal gerim like kahal. So according to Rabbi Kiva, there's no issue for him to marry this woman. Frank the Gemara, why did Rabbi Kiva say chayilton? So why didn't Rabbi Kiva say that he could even make evil? Rabbi Kiva said, he should have said shris adam yoy meyabe. Zok the Gemara, according to Rabbi Kiva, this shris can actually do evil. The idea to Rabbi Yeshua chaylit, since Rabbi Yehuda said chaylit and Rabbi Yeshua said chaylit, and Rabbi Yeshua didn't have the option to say miyabim. Therefore, Amar Iyu Nami Choylitz, he also used the nusach of Choylitz. Rabbi Yeshua, Rashi says, holds kal gerim mikri kahal. So a psudaka or a shris would never be able to do the evil. So since Rabbi Yeshua's language was the word Choylitz, Rabbi Kiva stuck to that parallel language. Didn't want to get into the other machloikis about kal gerim. He wanted to focus on this machloikis here, whether or not a shasa kosher helps. And Dekanami, and I can prove to you from the Mishnah Mineu Bey that in fact, according to Rabbi Kiva, Yibum would be allowed. Dikatani, hey Rabbi Shua ben Beser al ben Megusas, Shoy B'Shalayim Shris Adam, ve'Yib Moyesishta, L'Kayim Div Rabbi Kiva Shemamina. So in fact, you see that you could even do Yibum. Kavalti. So Mosav Rabbah has another kasha. Psuadaka, Ukushafa. Now this Brisa is elaborating on the Mishnah that we just learned. And the Brisa says, Psuadaka, Ukushafa, Sris Adam, which is going to be what's relevant to us, Vazake, which Rashi tells us, Nokat lei Bahadi Hanach. The reason why Zakan is in this list, even though he doesn't share the same halachas as this list, is Mishum Dudamilahu, the Hoysal Shasa Kosher, Bahashta Pasuk Milega. Because he also had a Shasa Kosher Zakan when he was young, and now he could no longer have children. Oy Cholzin, Oy Miyab. They can either do Chalitza or Yibam. They can do Chalitza or Yibam. Ketzat. Mesu, if they died, Vulahem Noshim, and they have wives. Ulahem Achim, and they have brothers, but they don't have children. So then, the Amdu Achim, if the brothers, the surviving brothers came, the Asu Maimer, if they did Maimer, or they didn't do Maimer, rather Venosnu get, or they gave a get, or if they did Chalitza, Masha Asu. So let's go down the list. If they did Maimer, this woman now becomes usher to all the other brothers. If they gave a get, this woman can no longer do Yibum with anybody. Right? In both cases, in the case of Maimer, the person who did the Maimer could do the Yibum, but all of the other brothers cannot. In the case of someone giving a get, no one may make yibum on this woman anymore. Or if one of the brothers actually made chalitza, masha asu, it works. Vimbalu, and if one of these brothers made bia on this yavama, kanu, they would be koiner like a regular yavam. What about the opposite case? Mesu achin, healthy brothers died without children. Bam duhain, and a shris adam, which is the case that we'll focus on, came, va'asu maimer b'nishoseim, and made maimer, or v'nas nuget, oichaltu, again masha asu vimbalu, but if they made bia kanu, then the bia would work and they would be kanu yavama. But the asur l'kaimon, but you wouldn't be allowed to stay married to this woman, mishum shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, lo yavoyu psuadaka ukushafa b'kalashim. Alma, you see from this brisa, which is explaining our Mishnah, b'kahalaskina. We're not speaking about a geiris here. We see that we're speaking about a bas Yisrael. So if we're speaking about a bas Yisrael, we go back to the original kasha. Since Rabbi Kiva holds that ain't kedusha toisa b'chayv elavin, and there's shris, there's a chiv la for him to live with this lady. So Mamela, there's no zika. So how could Rabbi Kiva say chot? Because it says b'kal Hashem. So the reason why he's not allowed to stay with this woman is because of kal Hashem. If it's going according to Rabbi Kiva, and he holds kal gerim like kal, he would be able to stay married to this woman. Dr. Gemara, El Amar Rabba, I'll tell you pshat in the Mishnah. When does Rabbi Kiva say that he's still mechuyev in chalitza, and his chalitza works, even though he's right now a shris, is when he only became a shris after his brother died, after this woman fell leave. And that's why, even though there's an isser for him, and you might want to say that since he holds that a chayv elavin creates a mamzer, therefore there shouldn't be a chayv yibum, and therefore there shouldn't be a zika. Here the zika preceded his condition of shris, and therefore that zika remains. Rashi says, first there was a zika, nifta, and only afterwards did he become injured. The hash the boy chalitza love zika. That's why a chalitza is required to take away the zika. Why do we say that since the zika came first, the zika remains in place? Who said? Maybe once the Isser Psuadaka arrives on the scene, it should be doicha the zika. And I'll prove to you that there's such a concept. Milaitnan. Now here there was a case where there were two brothers. One brother was married to a girl who was a gedola, a proper marriage, and he had no children. His brother was married to this girl's sister, but this girl's sister was a katana, a yisoima, and therefore he married this katana yisoima who's subject to miyun. So it's not a real marriage. The marriage is subject to miyun. And what happened was the brother married to the older sister died. So now this woman falls liyibum to the brother, but the brother it's not really a choisishtoi because his wife is not really his wife. It might be a choisishtoi, but right now it's not a choisishtoi. So what are you supposed to do in such a thing? Do you force him to give up his wife? If his wife makes miyun, that's great because now he's not married to the sister, so now he could do yibum. But vimlav, what if she doesn't do miyun? She wants to remain there. So what do you do? So let's think. Right now, when she's a ktana, when his wife is a ktana, and this woman, his sister-in-law, falls to yibum, midaraisa is a zika, because midaraisa, the marriage with this ketana is not recognized. So midaraisa is a full-blown zika here. So the zika is here, let's man the Poland. Now, wait until she becomes a gedola, his minor wife, and accepts the kedushin. So only later on, after the zika was chal, she'll grow up, and now she becomes his wife, and only now does the Isra Choisisha Midaraisa show up on the scene. And nevertheless, the Teitze Halazu Mishum Choisisha. So you see, even though there was a zika already preceding the marriage to this woman, once the marriage becomes solidified to this woman, the Isra Choisisha patters the zika. Alma Osi Isra Choisisha V'dachi. So Hakanami, even though there was a zika first, and only then did he become a shris, say the same thing. Nasi iser petua benitche. The only difference between the two cases is iser psudaka is a lav, and the iser of achoshish is kares. But according to Rabbi Kiva, it doesn't make a difference. An iser lav is just as chomer as an iser kares. I'm sorry. So your question is asay doich haloisasa. So let me. There's no say here because he can't believe him anyway, because he can't be boiling. The question is if there's a zika. The zika is not on the say. What? I'm not sure if the chalitza is in the say, but zicher it should be doicha. One second. By chi of karis. Let's go back. By a chi of karis. I'm sorry, but so let me take a step back. We originally, when we started the Masechta, the whole Masechta started with a say doicha loises. The Gemara said you have a raya from here that ain't say doicha loises as sheyesh bekaris, and that's why all of these arayas are not going to doicha, and therefore you don't do even there's no zika. Rabbi Kiva learns that any chayve lavin is also going to break the zika, just like everybody else holds by a chayve krisis. Because Rabbi Kiva also you treat a rice of chayve lavin just like you treat a chayve krisis. So that's a very good kasha because that's the assertions of Yevamos without the chivachazim. What I love about Yevamos is every gemara chazit iber the mesechta. It's a hard enough mesechta. At least they incorporate chazar into it. Gezok gemara El Amar Rabbi Yosef. Hi Tana. Who is the Tana over here who holds that the zika stays in place? Hach Tana devei Rabbi Kiva. It's a different Tana than the name of Rabbi Kiva. The Amar mechayve lavin de she'er have a mamzer. Mechayve lavin gredi le have a mamzer. Where does Rabbi Kiva say that chayve lavin creates a mamzer? That's a chayve lavin of a relation. Here, the isser of tzedakah is not a isser of a she'er of a relation. It's a zaytik gezach. It's a technical problem. He can't marry a Jewish woman. That wouldn't create a mamzer. So therefore, there will still be zika. Right. Well, no, he still can't do evil. He still can evil. There'll still be a zika. Even he can't do because the Gemara says ikri kan lahakim laachav shem v'halav bar haki. Hi, how could you say that he's right to do yibum? It says lahakim laachav shem v'halav bar haki. So for even if you have a seder chalosh at the end of the day, he cannot be lahakim laachav shem. He cannot do yibum. So oy bazoi, how do we understand over here still why there's a zika? Zakti Gemara, Amarava. If you're going to say that, im kain ein lach isha shekser liyam, then there's no woman who could ever do yibum. You know why? Because in order for a woman to fall to yibum, it's absolutely necessary as a prerequisite that her husband dies. Right? A man on his deathbed cannot have children. So therefore, every woman was married right before her husband died. Her husband was a saris. So Rabba im kain ein lach isha shekser liyam. Shloinasa bailos rischama shoachas kodim lemisasa. No, it goes both ways. If her husband was a shris, there's also no chiyuv. So let's see.
You buy a truck. Lav dafka is going to die of old age.
So let's let the Gemara theorize. Amar Rabba imkain the shasa kosher de mikara lav milsi. If you're going to argue that the fact that the shasa kosher shouldn't make a difference because you have a problem of lahakim la'achav shem, well then ain lach isha, that's who her husband didn't become impotent. Yisure misa, the pain of misa, matishin koichai. So we're talking nanoseconds, but there was the Gemara is arguing that at least for a minute moment, this person was alive, yet he couldn't have children. Ella, so what is the obvious answer? Amrinan hoil umeikara bar akamahava. Since before this last minute, there was a sasha kosher where he was able to have children. Bas chalitza, we say he's a bas chalitza. Hachanami loishna. So here too, even though right now he cannot be lahakim la'achav shem, he's still a bar chalitza, and therefore, according to Rabbi Kiva, he still has to do chalitza. Zok to Gemara. This is a very good teretz to help us understand Rabbi Kiva Shita as to why, even though right now somebody cannot have children, nevertheless, he could still do chalitza. But the problem is, Rabbi Eliezer, who doesn't hold that shasa kosher means anything, right? All Rabbi Eliezer holds is if it could be healed, then he's not a shris. But the fact that he says shasa kosher has no benefit, well, now piruka de Rava pirchi. The teretz of Rava to explain your Akiva now creates a huge headache for Rabbi Eliezer. Because how could you deny the value of shasa kosher and say that a shris adam doesn't do chalitza yibam, doesn't work? You see clearly, every person is only considered a non-shris because of the shasa kosher before the last moment before his death. Dr. Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with this, which is, I think, what Avigdor is referring to, and that is, even if there's a nanosecond before he died, he couldn't have children. That's not a din of shris. Hatam chishusa daschilabe. That's the beginning of death. That's not called shrisus. Rashi's chishusa ditchilabe alav shrisu elamisim akcheshes koichay. Everything's shutting down. So that system is shutting down as well. That wouldn't qualify as being a shris. So therefore, we don't have the problem that every person you have to rely on shasa kosher. No, you're not relying on shasa kosher. We consider him healthy as far as being a shris until his death.
What about full death, whatever?
That's a different story. That could be a different story.
There won't be any evil.
Well, according to Rabbi Yeshua, he holds that the fact that there's a shasa kosher doesn't matter if he becomes a shris. Maybe in a chanami. Yeah, maybe there wouldn't be even more chalitza. Yeah, because he was a shris. So the question is how much has to be? I don't know. That we shouldn't even have such shaylas. So what is the ma'aseh shris chama? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yochanan. So 6:34, and now we're starting today's daf. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Rabbi Yochanan. Kol shaloi ra sha achas bikash rusai. Rashi means there was never a time where he was healthy, meaning shalakam imeimai. He became already a shris while he was a fetus still. He never had a time where he was kosher. You know you didn't. Like, how could you tell? How could you tell if someone is a shris or not? Amar Abaye, kol hamatal mayim ve'ino isakipa. When someone makes meraglaim and it doesn't shoot out, like it creates like a projectile, that would be a raya. That would be a raya that he's a shris. So that's how they can tell. You know, I know many moyelim when they came to do the inspection the night before, they knew for sure that that the child wasn't the shris. There was a demonstration. Often the children demonstrate that to the moyel. What? Yeah. No, but my mom says, serious? I said, not shris. Zok the Gemara, mimai have. What causes this condition? What causes such a condition? So it happens, the afa ime b'tiara, if the mother, while she's expecting, she bakes at high noon, and Rashi says the heat of the oven, together with the heat of the day, causes damage to the child, or if the mother's a drinker, the shasi shichru marka. And Rashi says it either means full strength beer, or it means watered down beer. So if she does these two things, this will impact. Notice smoking is not on the list, and drinking is not on the list, but only these two things are on the list. What do you mean? Drinking. Oh, drinking, yeah. Here, yeah. Amr Yosef, Hainu Ishma'ana Le'imi de Omar. Now I know, I used to hear my mother say, and I never knew what she was talking about. She used to say the following words: Kol Shemimei Imay Lokut. Whoever it was this way since they were born. I never knew what she was talking about. Now I know what she's talking about. She's talking about what is a shris? What is a shris that we consider a shris without a shasa kosher? That would be mimei imay. Frank the Gemara, I don't understand. Yes, right now at the end of his life, he's a shris. Yeah, he might have been a shris when he was born, but it's 60 years later. How do you know that there was no time during this person's life from the moment that we're asking him to do Yibum, or from the moment that he died, if he's the deceased, from the time he was born? How do you know that there's no time in between where he didn't become healthy? So we're not choshes that in the meantime he was okay. Right, Gemara, I'll prove to you that you are choshes. When there's a certain moment that animals have in the eye, and it has to be a mum for an extended period of time. So it says your body can 3 times within a period of 80 days. And you need a badik at the beginning, a badik at the end, but you need a badik in the middle as well. So you see clearly there is a chashash every time. So when it's a question of a mum on the eye, Yes, then you might be chayish, the condition went away. But Lakula Gufa, which Rashi says that being a shris is considered a full body ailment. Rashi Lakula Gufa shris chama machmaschoili kol hagufu. So such a disease, like Chayshinon, we're not chayish that maybe he got better in the middle. If he was unhealthy at the beginning of his life, he's unhealthy now, we will assume that he was unhealthy the whole time. Rabbi Eliezer, loiki. What did Rabbi Eliezer say? He said it's totally in whether or not it could be healed. For a minute, ben Esrim Shana v'lahevi shtei saris. If someone is already 20 years old and he hasn't brought simonim yet, yaviu ra'ishu ben Esrim, you pull out his birth certificate, and we can prove that he's a shris. So this is very relevant. You have a woman who's a shtikal aguna now. Her husband died, and we're forcing her to wait to see if she needs chalitza from this surviving brother. And her family is saying this is a shris. He can't do yibum, and this woman is free to go. So the halacha is they have to bring a ride that he's 20 and he doesn't have simonim, and then she's free. Bas esem shana v'loivish teisaris. What if she's 20 years old and she doesn't have simonim? Once again, you view raya. She bas esem, the islandess, and then she's an islandess, and then there'll be no mitzvah of loiv cheletzes v'loivish hebetz. Diver Beisil, this is the opinion of Beisil. Bishami says, Zeh v'zeh b'nei shmoyne esrei. It's not 20, it's 18. Rabbi Eliezer Omer hazachar kediver Beisil. By the zachar, it's like Beisil. Unekeva kediver Beishamai. By nekeva, it's younger. A woman matures earlier than a man does. So by a man, you wait till you're 20. So let's think about it. What is Rabbi Eliezer saying? The definition of a shris is someone who never ever was healthy from his birth. We waited; he never had some money, but by 20 we determined he's a shris. So clearly, you see, he's defining a shris as somebody who doesn't have a shasa kosher. Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah said, "It's not do shasa kosher. It has to do with whether or not it can be healed." Amar Rami by Dekuli, Amar Shmuel, Chazu by Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was chayzer. So we have two opinions. We have Rabbi Eliezer here who says a shris is someone who didn't have a shasa kosher, and we have Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah who holds a shris is someone who can't get better. Which Rabbi Eliezer is the final Rabbi Eliezer? Ibailu mehai hadabe. From which shita was Rabbi Eliezer chayzer, and which shita remains his conclusion? Tashma. The Tanya we have another brayso. Rabbi Eliezer Yomer shris chama choylitz v'choylitz l'ishtoi. A shris chama. Das chalitza, and you could be chaylitz to his wife. Shekain b'minon misrapin b'Alexandria shomatzrayim. Because you see, even a shris chama can be healed. Let's see Rashi. Let's see Tashma himas nisim. You have a raya like our Mishnah that it's toila in misrapin, because he says shekain b'minon misrapin b'Alexandria shomatzrayim. B'samei hachtala il will ignore the brayso that we just quoted that says that it's totally in shasa kosher. Mikami tarte will throw away the previous brayso that we quoted. I won't say Rabbi Eliezer was chayzer, and our Mishnah and this brayso that we just quoted will be what we feel is Rabbi Eliezer conclusion. That's one pshat. It's because it's 2 against 1. But there's another pshat. Inami mi dekamaisi ma'isa Alexandria l'dvar. You have a kloraya, shmami no mahidal il hadabe. So you have a kloraya. Why do I need to drive from Alexandria? The Mishnah also says a lashon mipnei sheyesh l'refuah. Zakt Rashi. That's not a raya, because the ketani sheyesh l'refuah mishum the masham misfar krama. Who's saying him in a svara. Here he has an actual story to prove it. So clearly you see that it's totally in whether or not it could have a refuah. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, no, Rabbi Eliezer wasn't chayzer. We're talking about 2 different subjects. That wasn't a discussion regarding whether or not he could do chalitza or yibum, like we thought. No, that's just a discussion of whether this child is mechuyev anointing. Does he get malchus from being over a lab? Does he get misa from being over mitzvah d'shemayim? Being over a chiv misa? But it's not a question of yibum. Lagabe whether or not he's oil yibum or lechalitza, that's still totally in what Rabbi Eliezer said originally. That it's totally in. That could be totally in. If it is refuah. Zok to Gemara weiter. Itmar. Achal chela mi ben shteim esrei v'yom echad ad ben shmoin esrei. Now we know when a child normally when a girl is 12, she's a gedolah. But if there's a shaila here that she might be an islandess, so then she we don't know for sure that she's matured. We said according to Beishamai until she's 18. So the question is, what happens in between? So what happens if she ate chayla? It's a shaila that's talking about a he or a she. Rashi says it's talking about a she. Rashi says atinoi koiskai krabelezer damina keva keveshamai. That's why he talks about 18. So it's going back and forth using the lashon zachar and nekeva. But Rashi says, in fact, we're talking about a nekeva. It doesn't make enough kamina. We're just focusing on this on the suffix period. So zok the Gemara. And then there were Simon Yisris. So we assume that she's a Shris, and therefore there wouldn't be a Chiyuv Chatas. Rabbi Yosef asked the Kasha on Rab. Islanders, Rab Meir. Who's Rab Meir? Rab Meir holds a unique shita. The halach is if someone is ma'anis or mafata, if it's a ketana, there's a machlokes. Rab Meir holds a katana gets knas. Others learn a katana does not get knas. I want to make sure that I'm not mixing it up. According to Reb Meir, one second. According to Reb Meir, he holds a katana doesn't get knas. Reb Meir holds a katana does not get knas, but other Tanaim learn a katana does get knas. So, Frank Gemara, according to Rav, who holds that we consider her matured back from when she was 12. Once we find out later on that she's an idleness, so idleness for Reb Meir, Yehela Knas. She should get Knas. Why? Because what happens if she was Nenas or she was Mafuta back then after she was 12, which was those years, if we consider her a Ketana, that's why she doesn't get Knas. But since Rav holds that she's already a Gedolah from back then, so let the father go now after that rapist and say, now you see that she was a Gedolah when you were ma'anis, now you have to give me the knas. So according to her mayor, she should get knas. And we know the halach is an island doesn't get knas. Why not? If we say that once we find out she's an island, retroactively we say she was a gedolah back from when she was 12. So I bezai he should be able to mount the knas. No.
The status of islanders makes her a gedolah, or so because she's an islandess, it shows that the shtay status.
Once it's determined that she's an islandess, then we'll say that she was a gedolah all along. It's possible some people are not islanders, but they mature later. So then, let's say she gets her Cyrus at 15, so that's when she comes to gedolah. But if we find that she was an islandess, she was a gedolah from 12 already. Yeah, she won't have Simon gedolah. She won't have Simon. That's right. So Zok the Gemara. According to her mayor, you know why an island can't get knas? Because the only person who gets knas is a naira. Naira is between 12 and 12 and a half until she becomes a bagus. Once she's a bagus, she doesn't get knas anymore. When an island matures, she doesn't mature like a regular person who goes through a period of nairas. She goes straight from nairas to full adulthood, and therefore there's no period of time where she could have had a knas. So yes, in fact, we say that she became an adult back then, but she was never in the Naira period.
Naira is what gives you the knas.
Someone who's a Naira is the one who gets the knas. So Zok the Gemara. So let's see Rashi. L'Rav the Amar Nasa Gadol Mafreya Miyud Beis Veilach Islands Chamer Yelach Knas Chamishim Kesef Alama Tanya B'Mesachas Tubas Islands Ein Lachnas V'Loi Pitui. That's what it says in Elul Nairis. From a Kmin Lach Reb Meir. We said it's going to Reb Meir. The Amar Katana Ein Lachnas. The island is Hoyle the Ein Cyrus. Since she doesn't have Cyrus, Katana he B'Yamim Shoysaru Yelanairis. She is a Katana at a time where a normal healthy girl would have been a Naira. We don't say Kivin Sha'abu Yutches. Since she's already 18 years old, she didn't bring Cyrus. Nasas Gedolah Mafreya. She's considered already a Gedolah from when she was 12. L'chayev Kdas is only to be Minaris. You don't say that. The reason why you don't say that is because we say she goes straight from Katnus to Bagnus. So Amr Lei, so Rabbi Yosef loved the pshat that his Talmud Abai said, and he said, Kol Kihanim Milim El Yosa, such a Geshmak Achap, a Geshmak Ateret, a Geshmak Esfara, of Mikatnusa, Yotsu Salivager, Yisamrim Yishmoy. Any day you can say that in my name. See, my Rebbe would always tell me, Timach HaToy v'zug nish dan toiden manum. But Rabbi Yosef told Abaye, zug ya dan toiden manum. This is an emes a compliment. The Tanya we learned, Ein esris nidoin kiven tzoyer umayr. A sris will never be able to be a ben tzoyer umayr. If you ain't ben tzoyer umayr, nidoin el b'chasim azok ein etachtan. A ben tzoyer umayr, this is a little bit of a difficult Gemara, but I'll teach it simply. A ben tzoyer umayr can only become a ben tzoyer umayr from when he becomes a gadol till when he has chasim azok ein etachtan, which means still he has a lot of hair in that area, and therefore a ben tzoyer umayr doesn't have that, so he cannot be a ben tzoyer umayr. An islandless nidon is kanayim marasa, and an islandless could never be an ayim marasa. Shamikatnusa yatasalavad there. So you see this concept that she doesn't have the period of nairis. She goes straight from katnus directly to adulthood. Amar bavo simon yisris v'islandless uben shmoida. The simonim of a shris and an islandless and a ben shmoida, which we're going to see what that means soon. A baby that was born after 8 months, which is not viable. Ein oisin b'maisa achiyu ben esrim. We don't do anything with them until they're 20, until we're sure we know what happened. So Rashi tells us, Rashi says, Lachzikam begedolim. We cannot consider them gedolim. Usrisim achiyu b'nei esrim v'lo yaviu. You have to wait until they're 20, and if they still don't have simonim, then u'mishnei masar at esrim from 12 till 20 mitzapim lahem. We have to see what happens im yaviu. So im yaviu hareim ketanim adachshav. If they end up showing simonei gadlus, then it proves all along they were healthy. They just were late bloomers. But if they didn't bring, then we know them afraid they were gedolim. What's that, Rashi? A baby that was born after 8 months was normally not viable. Meaning we don't treat him like a ben kayama. Because of simonim, the Gemara is going to discuss what shows that the baby is going to be healthy. Even though you see that the baby developed, when it was born, you don't say so a child born after 8 months, we don't consider him for sure a ben kayama until he's actually 20 years old. So the law is, frankly, Gemara Batanya, we said, I'm sorry, I don't think so. Frankly, Batanya, Ben Shmoina, a baby was born after 8 months. The baby is considered like a stone because it's not viable. The baby will not survive. But also the taltlay, such a child is muks on Shabbos, meaning she can't even feed it. Avo, you could feed it. She can't lift him up, but she could bend over him and allow him to nurse without moving him because he's muksa. You know why? Mipnei sakana. What's the sakana? So Rashi, sakana shneim haben ba'im shelo b'chalav hadaden. Because if she has to nurse and she can't because she's not nursing, it's going to cause serious problems. So to Gemara, so the problem over here is Gemara Amar B'ho, the Simon is Shrisar, and she remains with suffix. So the problem is, let me see what the problem is before I get mixed up. It's speaking where she had Simona. We'll stop here. I'm not clear. I got a little mixed up. It's 6:52 anyway. We'll be here tomorrow. Shkoyach.